Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on a very sunny afternoon. We are very impressed that 210 of you so far are joining us. I'm Nicola Solomon. I'm the Chief Executive of the Society of Authors, and it's lovely to have Tracy Chevalier with me today. As you know, these sessions are all free, but if you have got a few crowns that you could donate to our emergency funds, we'd be very grateful, and we'll put the links in the chat here. What today's format is, there'll be a quick intro from me about Tracy, then Tracy and I are going to chat for about 30 minutes, so she'll give us a tour of her room and so on, and then we'll have about 15 minutes for questions. We've got some questions here. You can put questions in the chat and we'll try and get to them at the end if we can. So without further ado, Tracy grew up in Washington, D.C., where her father was a photographer for the Washington Post. And after graduating with a BA in English, she moved to London. Good move, Tracy. And she's lived here ever since. She worked for several years as a reference book editor, and then she did an MA in creative writing at UEA, and juggled freelance writing and editing until the success of her second novel, Girl with a Pearl Earring, after which she's been writing full-time. And I believe you're on your 11th historical novel, Tracy.
Yes, I am. As we speak, it's sitting right here. Here it is. Here's a little bit of it anyway.
Well, that is very exciting. I'm going to ask you to say more. The other thing I just want to say about you before we start is that Tracy is such a giver to so many organizations. She was a chair of our management committee, and indeed was the person who employed me, so you can blame her if you want to. And and she's a council member, but she's also a British Library Board trustee and so many other organizations. So huge thanks to you for that. So tell us, show us around your room. Show us around your room while you've got the video, which has been going in and out for us.
Okay, yes, I should. But before I do that, I just wanted to, I have the chat on, but there's so many names going past, but I did see Karen Warner's name going past. And Karen, I just wanted to show you, in amongst all of this pieces of paper is a story about Harold Flyswatter. See his name right up at the top? So Karen got in touch with me from Lincolnshire. Please don't everybody do this, because I don't have that much time to do many stories, but Karen is really brilliantly involved, her grandchildren, in writing stories about paintings. And she told me about this. And hello, grandchildren, if you're all there, Maisie Oliver. I've been choosing paintings for them to write about. And then Oliver chose the name Harold Flyswatter and said we were all going to write stories about it, and I am woefully late, so I always miss my deadlines, but I'm really sorry, Oliver and Karen. But I did start writing it in the garden the other day, and it got a little more involved than I realized it was going to. So I will finish it tonight, and then I will send it to you. So without further ado, so anyway, hello. And yes, I'm sitting in the back of my house. It's a little room. Behind me are built-in bookshelves. Those are all the books from my my research over the years. There's a shelf about apples. There's a shelf about medieval tapestries. There's a shelf about Vermeer, of course, and then I have this built-in desk. In a minute, I'm gonna take the camera and show you. I know it's a little bit wobbly, so I'm gonna tell you when to shut your eyes so it doesn't freak you out, because otherwise it's a bit blah. But it's this little place. I have a kind of L-shaped desk, which I had made out of Formica, and the reason it's L-shaped is because what happened when computers came in back in the good old days. Before that, we just sat at a desk and wrote, and then the computer got plunked in the desk, and there's no space for writing. And the thing is that I write by hand, so yeah, pieces of paper, and I actually write in notebooks like this. This is my new novel, and there's some in the back too, because that's. And so I write in notebooks. I have research notebooks, which is all full of writing. And so I write by hand, and then I type into the computer at the end of the day. And I needed a space on the desk to write at. So the L shape, I'm looking at you from the computer, and then I turn around and I can write and look out the window that's there. So it's a little space, and then in front of me, behind the computer, the person who designed the desk, it's some of it is cherry wood, and she made these little cubby holes. She said, why don't you put some cubby holes above that give you inspiration, like you put stuff in there. So that's what I'm going to show you first, and then I'll take you around the rest of the room. But so it's going to be a little bit blurry. First, I'm going to show you my shirt, which is what, and then I'm going to close your eyes for a minute. Okay, this is going to be a little bit wibbly. Okay, so I'm going to step back. Okay, you can open your eyes and see. Can you see? Okay, there's Nicola. Okay, now we're in a loop, and it's going to be this infinity thing, and the office is about to explode. That's really because you can see me in the back. Oh, there we go. Nice. Infinity today. So these are the cubby holes that are above my computer. So over here, I'm just looking, yeah, over here are all these things to do with fossils when I was writing about Mary Anning for Remarkable Creatures. Some of them are fossils I found. I'll show you one now. This is the where is it? Shoulder bone of an ichthyosaur in my hands. I'm really sorry. It's not easy to figure out where this is. Okay, there you go. Shoulder bone of an ichthyosaur, 180 million years old. And there are other bits and pieces. And then in here is a combination of quilting things and trees. So one of them is The Last Runaway. This is, this is trees. This is the cones from sequoias, which I wrote about. And there's apples in there. And there are patchwork quilts. That's from The Last Runaway. And then moving along, I'm going to actually move over to here because this is the fun bit. This is the kitsch corner for Girl with a Pearl Earring. Anything you thought, now it's broken. I'm so sorry. I've gone offline. I've gone out of my internet is not so good. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the rest of that tour when when my video comes back up. I'm very sorry about that. It's the broadband in North London is not great, so we will wait. But you can, I hope, still hear me.
We can hear you beautifully, and I'll ask you a couple of questions in a minute. Actually, that's already come up. I'm going to start with these because they fit into what I do. Do you always use the same brand of notebook, Sally?
Good question. No, I don't. I actually I tend to get ones that remind me of the thing that I'm writing about. So I had when I was writing about the Lady and the Unicorn tapestries in Paris, I got this very velvety, burgundy colored notebook that was very much like the color of the tapestries. For the Remarkable Creatures, which is about Mary Anning and fossil hunting, I got these kind of marbled on the front, gray and white, looked a little bit like rock and pebble. Sometimes, and then when I wrote New Boy, which was a retelling of Othello, I got a black notebook. Yeah, there you go. And I was, there we go. We're back again. For my new book is about Venetian glass and beads, actually. So I happen to already have this notebook, and I just thought, yes, I like the colors are strange, and I like the beadiness of it. I've got some other, it's also set in Venice, so there's amazing amount of paper there, and they make notebooks really well. So I'm just going to show you, I bought various notebooks. This is the notebook I like best. It's a Venetian map, a Venetian map from 1500. Beautiful. And this has some more research in it. So I try to have them make sense. Sometimes I'm starting something and I just got to grab a notebook and that's what happens. But yes, so those are the notebooks.
And Leslie Hart asked something, which is, why do you write at the front and the back of your book? And I think as you explained to us something about that in the trailer, which fits in very well with our theme about COVID. So do you want to explain?
Well, the novel that I'm working on, in fact, I'm just going to show you, the novel I'm working on is about Venetian glass beads. So things like this and that. Not sure. Yeah, it's a little blurry. And beads were made, there's all kinds of, Murano, which is the island off of Venice, is where all the glass factories are. And they've been there since the 14th century. And glass, they make all kinds of glass things, but they started making glass beads in the 15th century. and people started using them for trade. So Columbus took beads with him to the New World. They were taken to South America, to North America, to the slave trade in Africa. So I'm writing about beads over the centuries, following one family. So there are several sections at different centuries, and the first section is set in the 15th century. And I was writing that when the pandemic came and lockdown happened, and I found myself having a hard time focusing on the 15th century. It just didn't seem to make any sense to do that. And but the last section of the book is set in the 21st century, set now. And I thought, I'm just going to write. I'm going to write that. So I was writing the beginning of the notebook, the 15th century. And normally, as a writer, I write straight through a novel from page 1 to page whatever. But this time I skipped pages and pages and pages, and I thought, I'm going to start at the 21st century at the very end. So this is the 21st century section about what's going on now. And my feeling about that is it was sort of therapeutic, just like trying to make sense of things. I'm very aware that it may not work, that in a year or 2 years, we're thinking, I mean, I don't know about you, but I feel like I'm always thinking differently. Each week seems to be a different theme. So it was Tiger King one week, and it was yoga one week, and it was sourdough, and now I'm not sure what we're on. Oh, okay, we've gone out. Now I'm not sure what we're doing. But all of the things seem to be very ephemeral, and maybe what I'm writing is ephemeral as well, but we'll see. So that's why I don't normally do that. You did spot it, though. Well done.
I did, and that's really interesting. And so and is that the first contemporary thing you've written, because mostly you're writing historically?
It's not the first. My first novel was half contemporary, half historical. In fact, I see it over your right shoulder, Nicola. It's the Virgin Blue. And that's divided in half, so it's set right when in the 1990s, at the time when I wrote it. And it's about a woman who's looking up her family history. She moves to France, looks up her family history, and then the other half of the book tells the family history of her ancestors. So that was interwoven. But everything else, up until I wrote New Boy a couple of years ago, which is as a retelling of Othello, and that's set in 1974. And whether you think that's history or not, I don't know. It feels like yesterday, but that, I suppose you could call it historical. So, but everything else is historical.
As we were saying earlier, I've been staying in my mother's house during lockdown, and since the house is full of things that I was still wearing in 1974, it quite definitely does not feel like history.
Yeah.
But you normally do a lot of research. You said that much of the joy of writing historical novels comes from doing the research, holed up at the library, or better yet, being out on the road, standing next to giant sequoias in California, or fossil hunting on the beach at Lyme Regis, or walking from Soho to Spitalfields, imagining it's 1792.
Yeah.
Research is what gives me ideas, what helps me make up characters and plots. So how are you managing without that input?
Just to say, I hope you can still hear me, even though you can't see me.
We can hear you, we can't see you. So I'm ignoring
now I can pick my toenails and, look out the window.
Come back in the new outfit.
I was really lucky. Actually, I feel lucky all the way through this lockdown that I have enough to eat, that I have enough space, and most importantly, that I have a job that I already do from home. And luckily, especially, I had done most of the research that needed doing feet on the ground. So actually in early January, I was in northern Italy, and just before the pandemic came there, and I was in Venice researching, and I had been there a couple times before to do research. And I had all the books I needed. I had asked the questions. I'd made the contacts. I've become friends with people there who I'm constantly contacting and saying, are you wearing masks? Can you go for walks? Are there any boats out on the water? And it's wonderful because they can answer. And So it hasn't really affected my writing. I think what has affected my writing more is just the general uncertainty that we're living in. And it makes me realize, in films, they always like to show writers being really crazy and alcoholic, usually, just drinking a lot and writing late at night, lots of whiskey, lots of pulling paper out of the typewriters and throwing it over their shoulder and starting again, and drunken behavior and everything. Most writers are not actually like that. I'm really sorry, all writers out there who are watching this, but we are a pretty boring lot. I mean, we actually write better when we are boring. When our lives are stable, I guess is the way. For me, I don't write well when things are unstable. So it's been a little hard, but I'm just trying to take it a day at a time. And it's gotten easier. March was really hard. End of March was really hard. April was kind of weird. I don't know. I'm sure that other people, say in the comments if you felt this now, that there's a feeling of that we are progressing through something, not good, not bad, just different. And every week does feel a little bit like either we're obsessed with a new thing, or we're bored, or we're happy, or we're hysterical, or we're making a lot of jokes. And I feel like now in May, or towards the middle of May, we've entered this period of, oh, right, okay, I really do have to work. I really have to do this writing. I can't use the COVID as an excuse anymore to procrastinate. Because to be honest, I think it's easy to do that, and we should be forgiving up to a point, but now we got to get on with it. So I have been getting on with it and writing, and it's not been too bad. And I just keep thinking, oh, I'm really, really lucky to be at this stage. And I mean, this is the point in writing a novel when actually I should just be chained to my desk writing, producing page after page. And there is quite a lot more research I need to do, but it's stuff I can figure out later when I can travel again. And hopefully that will be sometime in the next year. We'll see.
It's very interesting to see your data comments coming in.
Yes.
Feedback here.
March was especially
which are basically saying that, yeah, some agree. Some people are saying they're definitely not stable. Some people are saying they're drinking whiskey right now. But many people are saying the same as you.
Yes.
That it's getting a bit easier and a bit more settled at this point. So it's an
interesting. Alison Riley has just said, I'm in northern Italy, and we're going through the same things just ahead of you in Britain. It's true. Italy is a couple of weeks ahead of us, and it's weird. There are going to be so many studies of this time done about our psychology and what we go through as a community, as a society, as a world, when we're all experiencing the same thing at the same time, but not exactly at the same time. So exactly, Italy is a little bit ahead. So maybe Alison, you can write down in those comments, what should we be anticipating in 2 weeks? What's going to happen to us in 2 weeks' time over in England?
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. I'm going to go back into some of more of your general questions. People ask, generally, what's the balance between research and writing? How long do you spend researching? How long do you spend writing? And do you start writing when it's really more or less all of there in your head, or does the story evolve as you write it?
I'll answer the last one first. It evolves when I'm writing. And I know that English teachers the world over say, plan what you're going to say. And I'm sorry, English teachers everywhere. I have an idea. Okay, so I start the research, and the research probably the initial research takes anywhere from 6 months to a year, depending upon the subject and also what I'm still finishing up with the previous book. So I finish a book, and I when I'm publicizing that, when it's published, I'm also researching the next one, and those sort of dovetail together. So I do research, and then there comes a point when I've read all the books, I've talked to all the experts, I've been to the places, and I'm kind of restless, and I'm also feeling like I don't really understand this stuff. I don't really understand glass, how it's made. I don't understand the beads. There's all kinds of gaps in my knowledge. I need to find the perfect book that's going to fill in those gaps. And then that's when I realized the perfect book is the book that I have to write. So you're never going to be 100% there with research. You're always evolving, and that's not necessarily a bad thing in a way. What happens is you start writing. I mean, what happens during the research is that I'm developing usually the main characters in my head. I start to know what they sound like, what they're like, what their characters are like, and their personalities. And then when I put them into scenes, when I start writing, I get a even better sense of who they are, what they're like, and what the journey is, what they're doing, how they are at the beginning, and how they're going to be at the end. And that's what I do know, is how they change. I don't always know what changes them, but I usually know the why they change and what they change into. And that part. So then when I start writing, I'm pushing the plot forward. I'm expanding the characters, and I bit by bit sort of know, yeah, this is what's going to happen to them. So the plot kind of develops as I write, and then all the way through that, the plot throws up things that I have to find out more about. So I'm writing a scene. I was writing a scene where somebody's riding in a gondola, and I thought, I know it's not going to be a gondola, it's going to be another boat. And there are a lot of boats in Venice. It's a very complicated system of what kind of boat is what. And I haven't really got to the bottom of that, although I've seen a lot of them, so I need to go and do some boat research. So sometimes I'll be writing, and then I'll go, okay, today I'm going to do my boat research, or it might take place over a couple of weeks or whatever. So it's a constant in and out, just the way this internet connection is. I'm so sorry. It's just in and out. You get little flashes of me. But the thing is that I talk a lot, so I'm just filling in the picture for you.
And actually, you were about questions around your research. Someone says, I'm writing a novel based on history. This is from Stephanie Green. However, there are times, despite research, that I cannot find out exact information. Is it okay to use what was likely at that time for settings, e.g. what sort of plants would be in 18th century hothouse? But how about more serious interpretations of a historical person's character? Can I accuse a historical figure of a major crime like rape if there's no evidence? So how much do you have to be true to
it's a very good question, and a tough one to answer, because each situation, each character is slightly different. But I try not to. Sometimes I make things up, but a lot of it is based on what seems likely to me, seems commonsensical to me. I mean, I guess the most famous example is Girl with the Pearl Earring. The painting, we don't know who the girl is, but to me, the look she's giving us is very intimate. So I thought, he knows her. She must be somebody who's local, and I don't think it's a daughter, because it's too sensual to be a daughter, a depiction of a daughter. And so who is it? Well, if somebody nearby, it could be a neighbor, but I think it's somebody in the house. And then I thought, okay, I'm going to, it's going to be the maid. It's going to be the servant. That'll make sense. And that's what, so it's all based on commonsensical suppositions. But on the other hand, I don't think I could accuse a character of rape, have a character be a rapist if we don't know that they were. I think that's taking it a step too far. But they can be bad. They can be kind of not great characters. They can, but I have to be very careful. So my last novel, A Single Thread, which came out last year, is set in Winchester Cathedral in the 1930s, and it's about a group of volunteer women who embroider cushions and kneelers for Winchester Cathedral. And when I was researching it, I discovered this woman named Louisa Pazel, who is she was the organizer of the whole group of women, and she really existed. And at first I was going to write the novel about her, and then I thought, you know what? She didn't have children, so, but she had nieces and nephews, and there might be somebody out there who would really care about how I portray Louisa Pazel. And if I'm not if I put her into situations or have her do things that aren't quite what a descendant would like, they're still alive. It's not like writing about Vermeer, which is centuries ago. So I just decided that that Louisa Paisel would be in the book, but she's a minor but important character. And I'm so glad I did that, because the day before I went personally into lockdown was in March, and I was giving a talk at Two Temple Place in London, and Louisa Paisel was one of 7 women who are there was an exhibition about them as textile collectors. And I got an email from a woman named Anne Cleverly, and Anne is the great niece of Louisa Paisel. And she came down to this exhibition to the talk I gave, and we met, and I said, "You're the reason I did not make Louisa the main character, because I just didn't feel it was appropriate." So you have to use what feels appropriate, and that just didn't. I'm a well-behaved historical novelist, although I do also find gifts of. So when I wrote Remarkable Creatures about Mary Anning, she existed, and there were things that I try to stick close to the truth. So there was a point where there was a meeting in London by the Geological Society that I really wanted her to attend, but I knew that Mary Anning had only been to London once in her life, and that was way after the novel took place. And I thought, I cannot take her up there when I know that she did not go. However, I can send her friend Elizabeth Philpott, who is also a real character, but we know very little about. And she's from London originally. And I thought, I could have her go to the meeting instead. So it's those kind of decisions you have to make.
It's like different subject. Lynn Steinhardt. How much is your father's career as a photographer influenced your individual arts?
Oh, my dad. Okay, I'm just going to go get a photo of him. Nope. Here we go. I'm still here. There's photos around the corner. Okay, this is my dad. There we go. That's Doug Chevalier.
Oh,
He was a photographer for the Washington Post, and the irony is that I take terrible pictures. I really don't have a visual eye in that way. So, but nonetheless, I think he was a good example of showing me every day how you tell a story with an image, and that you can do that. And if you translate that into doing it with words, it becomes a very visual thing. So like if you flip it back, so if I'm looking at a painting, say, and trying to describe it in words, there's something very there's something very visual about my writing, and I think it might stem from Dad. That I when I write a scene, I visualize it in my head, and then I write down what I see. So it's quite filmic. It's like I create a little film in my head, or I create a photograph in my head, the way Dad created a photograph, and then I describe what I see. And I saw that every day in the Washington Post when he'd have a photograph accompanying an article, and the two of them together were more than the sum of their parts. And just seeing how that worked every day, I think probably had an effect on me.
And
great guy. Pardon?
You choose very visual subjects too.
Yes, I do. I choose visual, and also a lot of making, a lot of doing and making. So painting and weaving and embroidery. So, and then I do it myself. So when I wrote A Single Thread, it's about this. It's canvas embroidery, and in the book, the main character, Violet Speedwell, makes a spectacles case for her mother, and that's what I made. So I learned how to do the embroidery myself. It's actually not that hard. And then she makes a needle case for her niece, and I made that too. And I did it because it's much easier to describe something when you've actually done it yourself than when you're basing it on what you see other people doing or how other people describe it. And it gives you a better literal sense of it. So when I wrote Girl with a Pearl Earring, I took a painting class. I was terrible at it, but at least it gave me a sense of how to hold the brush and what the paint feels like. And And I do that all the way through. So Remarkable Creatures, I found the fossils on the beach, just like Marianne, and that it really makes it feel more authentic, I hope, for readers.
Yeah, I must say I've been doing embroidery during lockdown. And do you carry on with any of these hobbies?
Oh yeah, yes, I do. And the last Runaway a few books ago is about a woman who's a quilter, amongst other things, and I learned how to quilt in order to write it more authentically, and I really loved it, so I kept on quilting, and I still quilt. And in fact, I started making a quilt for a friend during lockdown, and it's just been the most beautiful thing to do. Joya, it just calms me at night because okay, I was going through a point, especially in March, when I was watching the news at 10. Nah, don't do it. And I was just getting upset, and I couldn't sleep, and I thought, okay, no more news after 7 p.m. Don't look at anything. Don't read anything. And at night, I started a quilt because it's beautiful. And I started it, and I listened to classical music, or jazz, and just sit in the corner of the sofa at night. The lights are low and it's calm, and I just sew, and it just calmed me right down. So I will always remember that quilt as the coronavirus quilt that saw me through, but in a positive way. Like can we take this experience, the fact that we have all this information, all this time, and actually use it to be creative.
With me, it's Antiques Road Trip with my mother and the embroidery on the sampler.
Yeah.
So we are. I know the price of everything now. You were an editor, so who edits your work? Do you write, and what stage do you give it to them? Do you have to feel it's oven ready, or do you have people reading as you go through?
I have two editors, my UK publisher, who is editor, and my US publisher's editor. And I like having two different takes of it. It's always been like that. For some reason, some writers go with one, some go with the other, some only have one, and that's fine. But I rather like, long ago when I was first starting, the two editors I had, one was the UK editor was really good in history, and the US editor was really good in storytelling, and they made a great combination. And then I just kind of continued that ever since. The personnel has changed over the times. People retired or changed companies, but my editors now, what happens is I write a draft, and then I print it out, and I redraft until I can't do anything more to it. And usually I still know it's not quite right, but I just need to have somebody tell me, somebody else read it and say, here's what the problem is. And so when that point comes, I press send, and it goes to the two editors. They read it, and then they confer with each other, and they give me notes, and then I work from those notes to fix the book. And the best editors are when they say something and I think, oh yeah, of course, I already knew that, I just hadn't articulated it. And that's the key, is just finding somebody who is on the same wavelength as you, and is constructive criticism rather than just editing to show off. I've been blessed with not having editors like that, thank goodness.
And on translation, I think has been translated into 38 languages. How do you feel about translations for your work, and do you collaborate with your translators at all?
I don't collaborate. I've gotten to know them, especially my wonderful Italian translator, Massimo, who's just great, but I don't speak much Italian, and I do speak French. I don't like rereading my books very much. Like having to read it in French, that would just kill me. So it's bad enough in English, but so what happens is that they often write to me when they're in the middle of translating and have a lot of questions. And it's very interesting because, the editing process, your editor helps you edit it and you get it in shape. And then they give it to a copy editor who does a closer read. So they're the ones who pick up, like you said, their eyes are blue on page 64 and they're gray on page 171. What's it going to be? Those sort of things. And good copy editors really save your bacon a lot. They catch the stupid mistakes we make. And I had a really vicious copy editor for a single thread, and she was great. Thank God, I thank my stars for her. But even she didn't catch everything, and it's only especially my French translator just caught so many different things. And once she realized that I was willing to respond, she said, "Oh yeah, well also on this page, what about this? What about this?" So it's a work in progress. I make a lot of it. We all make errors, and I mean mostly they're little tiny things. They're not like factual errors. It's more things like, here she's, on this page she's got a cup, but then 2 pages later you say it's a glass. So which is it? And it's like, oh, or she's standing or sitting or that. So all of those that goes on. And then the translating, I love meeting my translators because it's a very special relationship. They go inside your head and they look out through your eyes. And so they kind of know your writing even better than you know it yourself. Because when I'm writing, I feel like it's very instinctive what I do. But my translators are very they're very on, and they're actively looking out through my eyes and going, okay, what am I doing here? And it's an amazing process. So I'm always grateful to them.
And you said that people pick up quite a lot of mistakes. Presumably readers do too. Has there ever been a real howler that someone's written to you about that? And are you going to tell us too?
There's one that I'm so embarrassed about. I've never told anybody. I'm probably blushing now. It's like, oh God. Another one that's maybe not so awful, but it's sort of, oh, Tracy. In Remarkable Creatures, I describe one of the characters. It's set in the early 19th century, so it ends in 1824. And I describe one of the characters, Elizabeth Philpott, her dress as mauve. Well, they didn't invent mauve until 1856. And a reader wrote and told me so. So thank you very much. Yes,
I think
I do that sort of thing all the time. Not all the time, but there are definitely, I try to check things, but sometimes you just write something you don't realize you need to check it. And it happens to me too, even though I've written so many. So there you go.
Just moving on more, that's brilliant. I'd love to spend loads more time on your writing process, but I realize that we're going to have to get towards the end. In this time, you've talked a bit about what it's like, but how are you connecting and what inspires you during this? Uh-oh, you are there.
I'm here. I'm just not on the screen. Yes, I'm just thinking. I was looking out the window and thinking, it's a really hard time to find inspiration, if I'm honest. I'm grateful, as I've said before, I'm grateful that I already had an idea for a book, because I think if I were scrabbling around trying to figure out what to write right now, it'd be really difficult. And also, wow, contemporary novelists. Boy, if you're there and you want to comment on this in the chat, please do. I don't know what I would do if I was writing something that's set right now. Like I've just said, I'm writing a section that's set now, but it's a really small part of the book. It's not the main event. It's not really commenting about today's society. Whereas if you're writing a novel that's set now, what do you do? And you're in the middle of it, what do you do? You set it before the pandemic, and then it just seems like, well, who cares, because the pandemic's about to come. It's like setting something, in I don't know, 1930s. You have to find the thing, or do you set it during the pandemic, and then you think, well, in 2 years when this comes out, or 3 years or whatever, maybe nobody's going to want to read about it anymore, or it's changing so fast, or do you go back to history, which is, luckily what I've done, and I do it naturally anyway. So it's a really tough. I think I take a lot of solace in my friends and my family. I know we all talk about the Zoom cocktail hours and stuff, and people make fun of them, but actually, my friends, there's a group of women I'm on a WhatsApp group with, a group of moms who've known each other since our kids are babies, and thank God for them. They have been saved. We've all saved each other's lives several times over this past 2 months. We make each other laugh. We support each other when we're down, and everybody's been down at one point or another. I think I've discovered a wonderful, wonderful Twitter feed by Emma Mitchell, who has written oh, I was just going to show you it, but you're not, I can't show you. I'll show you when I come back on. A diary called The Wild Remedy, How Nature Mends Us. And she's got an amazing eye for, she arranges flowers from her garden against a backdrop. And they are, so look her up, everybody, on Twitter, Emma Mitchell. And it's just looking at the images makes me feel better. And she writes about how nature can make you feel better. And I spend a lot of time. I have a tiny, tiny garden in London, and it's a bit wild. And it's covered with Welsh yellow poppies now. But I just sit out there, and I'm very happy. And the walks, you know, especially when we could go for a walk a day, I was just so glad to get out and nature. I mean, Mother Nature gave us a really beautiful spring, and we were very lucky. The weather wasn't too bad, and I just saw the leaves coming out and all of that. I have to say, food has been a comfort. I've been baking a lot and cooking a lot, and all of that. I don't know if it's inspiration. I think it's more comfort. It's more like sort of grounding us and saying we're still here, and this will change. We will find a new normal. It's just going to take some time, and we have to be patient and try not to change the big things. Just look at the things in front of you and do it that way.
What are you reading at the moment?
What am I reading? I am reading the Lost Children Archive, which won the
fantastic
prize. And it's about a family, a Mexican American family, who go down to the border in Texas, doing research about lost children who are trying to come from Mexico into the States, and it's also about their family kind of breaking up. I've read a lot of, actually, if I'm honest, I haven't really landed on many books that have meant much to me during this time. I have a hard time focusing, and I did reread I Captured the Castle, and that was great. I started the Cazalet Chronicles, which is the Elizabeth Jane Howard, and I for some reason put that aside, but I'm going to take that back up. And I think it's things like that. I'm looking for stuff that's sort of set in the past, that's light, very much of its time, but not too far back in the past. And I have to admit, television has really saved me quite a bit. I'm now at the moment I'm watching. I'm going between Ozark, which is very violent and wonderfully beautiful, fantastic storytelling, and Unorthodox, which is they're both on Netflix, both great in very different ways. It's that I just think, you know, you can find storytelling in books and you can find it in television and all sorts. I think I'm not worried about the future of books in all of this, because as somebody said to me, books are the one thing that you can actually do on your own. You don't have to worry about social distancing. So I think people will always continue to read. I'm very worried about performance, the performing arts, the theater, ballet, music. How are we going to, how long are we going to have to distance from each other and be able to, before we can go back and see performances? And will actors and musicians be able to, and dancers be able to survive a year or two without being able to do that? Books, I think, will survive. And I just wanted to give any advice, couple of bits of things for people who are listening, actually, because you can't see me at the moment, but are listening. If you're writers and you're having problems, there is an amazing Authors Emergency Fund set up by the Society of Authors that's helping people who are having published writers who are having financial difficulty. So please go to the Society of Authors website and look at that. And also do remind yourself to join ALCS, Authors Licensing and Collecting Society, and also Public Lending Right, PLR. If you register your books, it means that when people are taking them out from libraries, and it includes ebooks now, so even people who are not going to libraries, it still counts. So do register, because you'll get little bits of income from this, and all that stuff adds up, and you really need it right now, because book sales, it's hard for people to go into bookshops. I mean, hopefully soon, but these are the things that can save you right now. So please take advantage of them.
Oh, I love Tracy doing my job for me and telling us all those things. And so with our emergency funds, we've now given out grants to over 600 people, and they've been really appreciated, and that's been great. So both in terms of if you need to apply, please apply to us. And if there's any chance that you could give any donations, go to the links and give even small amounts, because we're hoping to keep those funds open right till the end of the year, because we don't know what's happening with royalties and so on. And I was going to ask you actually about bookshops. How are you supporting your local bookshop at the moment, Tracy?
My local bookshop is the Owl Bookshop in Kentish Town, and not many people know this. It's actually owned by Daunt Books. So when I read a review of a book, and I thought, I'm going to see if I can order it online from Owl. And Owl itself is not doing online deliveries, but Daunt is. So I ordered it from Daunt, and I also, and then I ordered, there's another book I got, and I think it might have been, here's the Emma Mitchell book. Yes. And I believe she's on Twitter, is Silver Pebble, so look her up. Anyway, I ordered, you can also order books from hive.co.uk, and they are very supportive of independent bookshops. Yes, of course you can go to Amazon, but as you know, probably Amazon they didn't prioritize books, which, whatever, for whatever reason. And so it's not so easy to get books from them, but you can. I also bought some books on Kindle, like the Castle Lake Chronicles I bought on Kindle, and the Lost Children Archive. So there are definitely ways to support the book industry. It's not like you have to stop reading. Though I have to admit, I did think, well, there are a lot of books in this house that I have not read yet, so maybe I should get to them. So I have a big old stack of books that are to be read, that are by my my bedside.
We're nearly at the end. In fact, we're really over time, but I'm going to take another couple of minutes. And I feel bad because we haven't got to many of the questions, but I hope we've got the flavor of many of the questions we've asked. I'm going to ask you one thing that we ask everybody, because you're a council member, you've been very active with the Society of Authors. So I want to ask you what the Society of Authors means to you.
The Society of Authors is really important. I think as writers, we don't tend to think of ourselves as needing or having a union. And actually, we do have a union. It's called the Society of Authors. So if you're having any sort of trouble with publishers, with booksellers, with whoever, with your agent, you can get legal advice from the Society of Authors. You can get support. The Society of Authors does a lot of programming of all kinds of things. Well, you can tell more, but it's if you need to know how to set up a website, or you need tips on how to do a better event, or how to get events, how to generate events. All of that stuff is on the website and physically available too. So I just think it's an absolutely essential thing to do. Any writer who's published should be there, because if no other reason, when you get your contract or draft your contract, you have not signed it yet, just hand it over to them, and they will look. If you're a member, they will look it over for free and usually point out a couple of things that could be better in your favor. So. Really worth doing, and beautifully run, beautiful new offices too, when we finally get to go back to offices.
And one question I'm going to ask you just before we go, Tracy said, Pippa Goodhart said, you were one of the people on the Society of Authors tour of Dickens' house. I'm wondering, hoping, that you're writing a story that relates to Dickens.
I'm not. I was just always interested. Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, the Society of Authors set up a tour to do Dickens' house. So I have a list of, everybody has this. We have a list of things that are near us, wherever we live, that we've never gone to. So I had never been to Dr. Johnson's house. I finally went. I had never been to the Charles Dickens Museum. And when I saw that the Society of Authors was doing that, I thought, I'm going to go. So that was why I went. It's to tick it off a list. I was very curious, but I thought it was a really beautiful museum. And but a lot has been written about Dickens. I have a tendency to go for the lesser known stories, but there was a great novel a few years ago A Woman in a Blue Dress, I think it's called, about Charles Dickens' wife, much maligned. Poor Catherine. Oh, it makes you really question Dickens. Woo!
Yes.
Anyway, so I think that the novels have been written, so I need to look elsewhere.
And Elizabeth Lee says, I've read and loved almost everything you've written. Do you have a favorite book or character from your own work?
I actually
also asked if you take them with you and consider. But another question asked was whether you take them with you and whether you continue thinking about them. So those.
Yeah, they're all here. They're all here. Even when they've died, they're here. They're with me. I think that it's often the book that I've just written because it's so much on my mind. But I am quite partial to Violet Speedwell, who's the heroine of A Single Thread, and she, in a funny sort of way, she's a little bit like Greet and Girl with the Pearl Earring, except she's 20 years older. Greet was 18 and Violet's 38 when the book starts. And funny enough, the two books are 20 years apart. I wrote them 20 years apart. Woo, weird. I didn't even realize that till afterwards. But I think there's I just really, I think Violet is one of those characters that gets under your skin. She has it's like a seemingly small story, but actually she's rebelling in this sort of quiet way, these little acts of rebellion. And I think there's something about her that's very satisfying to see what happens to her.
Thank you so much. Is it one more word that you would consider to people before we go?
I would say this time, I wish that I had kept a diary of this, a journal of this last few months, because it is a really unusual time. So I would say write things down, because you're going to forget. You're going to forget all the crazy things that went on and the silly jokes we made and how we got through. And I think that's really we will get through it, and we will be a little bit changed. And I think it's useful to have a chronicle of that. So that's my recommendation now.
Brilliant advice. Thank you so much, Tracy.
You're welcome. I'm just sorry we keep going in and out of, we keep going in and out of visual, but somehow this has worked. We just have to go with it. But yeah.
We did get to talk round, so thank you so much.
Yes, and thanks everybody for coming. I love seeing the chat. I can't read them all, but I'm seeing them whizzing down. It's really great to have you here. And look what we've done. We've transformed how we communicate and how we see each other. So it may be that we will do more of this, and that's great.
Yes, well, that's certainly we're hoping to. And yeah, thank you to everyone who listened in. I'm going to eject Tracy now. It's very powerful here.
Bye.
To remind everyone, all sessions are free, so we can turn it forward to and we're going to sign off in a moment. But please continue chatting for about 30 seconds and then go over to social media where we've got to have